And we're back. This is Professor Plum with the Minnesota Sales Institute with Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
And I am back as well and excited to be here. So what is your attitude like in these trying times of a national lockdown and fears of a pandemic? Does your attitude matter? And if it does, what steps are you taking to keep it upbeat and productive? We're going to discuss how attitude makes a difference and much more on episode 402 of the Get in the Door podcast.
We're so great to get a response from our listeners, and I'm just really excited about the feedback that we've gotten being back on the air, and I'm grateful for Bill to join us on Get in the Door podcast. We've gotten some emails and some comments on the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com, and thanks Greg, Jeff, Mark, and Sue for your comments, and thank you for the LinkedIn invites. Just around the world, LinkedIn invites are coming in, and people are saying that they're really happy that the podcast is back and the information is relevant and what's going on in the marketplace, and it's nice when it can be used in other cultures. So, Bill, are you getting any comments like that?
Yeah, I wanted to read a couple of comments that came in. Mark Smith says that Steve's encouragement is a constant friend to me during those emotionally troubled times in sales, and most of the times are troubling. His creative and timely podcast kept me going. I especially love the books he would pick and read from to get the discussion going. Just excellent. And Scott and I are going to take on that book challenge. We're going to start one in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about that later, but that's a tee up for you. Greg Weinman says, Steve had a huge impact on my sales career so far, and we're hoping we can carry that on for you, Greg. Starting from my first job out of college 5 years ago, I leaned on the expertise shared through this podcast. I owe a lot of my early success so far to Steve. His podcast helped me think differently about sales.
Bill, I'd like to add, I've talked about this in the podcast before, but a definition of a salesperson is a person that has an impact on the experience and an influence in the outcome. And you can really hear the impact that Steve has made on people's lives just by the feedback from the listeners and the influence in the outcome on what the listeners did after they learned something from Steve. And that's really the process of change. It's really great to see evidence of that even after Steve has passed. So,
well, change is intentional, and you've got to make a decision. When we do a podcast like this or anything, if you read something, you go out and do something different as a result of them. Don't be what a friend of mine calls a good attitude bum, where you just know a lot of things you should do and you don't do them.
Yeah, breaking it down real simple, it's a difference between, do you know what to do? Well, if you don't, then figure out what you need to do. If you know what to do and you're not doing it, then that's the second part, is just having the guts and courage to apply it. And change is inevitable. Growth is optional. I mean, Absolutely. Are we going to look at this opportunity in this marketplace right now? And are we looking for opportunities to be able to find new opportunities, which is really what we need to do.
Right.
And we need to be accustomed to unlearning and relearning. How do we deal with our customers and our prospects?
Super. All right. Well, with that opening, the first topic we want to talk about is our book club. Mark mentioned he thought the books were important, and the first book we're going to start with is one of my favorites, The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz. It's an oldie written in the 50s, I believe, but it's tremendous. And I think I've read it every couple of years. It's one of my top 10 self-improvement books. I think Forbes listed it as one of the top 10 self-improvement books or personal development books ever written. And I think it really helps you understand how believing in yourself will guide you towards success. And we'll get to it later, but one of my favorite chapters, he talks about excusitis. What are the excuses you make? I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, there's a pandemic and we're in a lockdown. And if you believe the excuses, it's going to be devastating to your ability to achieve. So Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz.
It's so great that you brought that book up. And for the loyal listeners, if you have heard that term before, it's because I've shared it with you in back podcasts. And that's where I learned it, was from that book. The version that I have is from 1973. The pages are yellow. The book was copyrighted in 1959. I did buy a new version because I didn't ever want this one to break apart on me. And the one that I bought recently says there's more than 4 million copies of this book sold. And I really think that this is one of the best kept secrets in personal development. There's some other great books. Think and Grow Rich is very popular. Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, very, very popular. This one is loaded with content in so many different areas of professional and personal development. I'm really glad that we're doing this book, and I'm glad that I've gone through it already once because I can use all my highlights and save some time. So thanks, Bill, for picking this book.
I can't highlight books. It's against. I don't know. I can't write in them. It's just that old school. I went to a school that was cheap, and they said don't ever write in the books because we got to give them to the next people. So.
You went to the library too often because that was the rule at the library, Bill. Is you can't write in the book.
So I would do what Scott says. Write in your book, underline it, highlight it. If you can't write in it, put a piece of paper at the beginning of each chapter and make some notes on what's important to you. That's what I found myself doing.
I think a lot of people are looking at it online or on their Kindle or their iPad or they're highlighting. I mean, it's really incredible, the powerful applications that we have when reading books and highlighting and putting together your summaries and printing your notes and sharing with others. It's just incredible.
I think you can pick it up for $10 on eBay or Amazon. It's not an expensive book. If you want to get a used copy, it might be highlighted. Trouble with used copies, if they highlighted the wrong things, then you're in trouble.
Exactly. Blindly.
So get a new copy that you can highlight on your own.
Should we talk a little bit about Steve's products? I really wanted to tell our listeners and remind them about the book that Steve has. Even though he's gone, the legacy and quality sales training is carried on in his website. You can visit the website at theprospectingexpert.com. You can look for the book. You can look for some of his coaching tools, some of the call reluctance transformer. There's some really great tools that are very relevant when it comes to prospecting and applying them in today's marketplace. So that website, again, is theprospectingexpert.com.
Yeah, if you liked what Steve talked about on the podcast, you're going to find it in his materials. It wasn't a secret. He wants you to do it. He wants you to use those ideas. So take some time on theprospectingexpert.com and relive a little bit of what Steve was putting out there and have it permanently in your library. Well, we want to talk about attitude makes the difference and spend some time on this attitude topic. I know it's important, and I know it's hard to control sometimes. I grew up in a very negative family. I wasn't negative toward other people, but my dad I would call him an Eeyore. He was looking at the negative side of everything, and I had to work very, very hard my whole adult life to break out of that. And my wife still accuses me of being a little bit negative. But if you are negative in your outlook toward life, you've got to work at it, because I don't think you can be negative and be successful as a salesperson. What's your thoughts on that, Scott?
Well, I think every day we deal with adversity, and we need to be resilient in the challenges that we have. It's the only way that we're going to grow. I always think about the acorn turning into the mighty oak tree, and it became a strong mighty oak tree because of the wind made it strong, and the adversity made it strong. And when we apply a commitment, and many listeners know that's my word, when we apply commitment to a goal, we're not going to let the obstructions, the obstacles, or the adversity get in our way. And when we've achieved that goal, we own that goal. We own that feeling of victory. And there's a difference between being a victim and being a victor. And when I get that feeling and I get that angst and I go, gosh, this is just not going to work. I don't know. I mean, there's that self-doubt and that seed is planted. The question I always ask myself is, where is the evidence? Right. And I can never find it.
It's interesting because I think that you started to talk about self-talk, and I think that is so important. What you say in your own mind. Are you saying, I can't do this? Or are you saying, I can do this? If you can have better self-talk, be more positive toward things working out, it's going to keep you motivated. If you're saying to yourself, you know what, I've made a lot of phone calls and they never pan out. Well, you're not going to be motivated to make phone calls. If you can focus on those, we know it's only 10 or 20%, right? We know it's a low percentage, but that's your job, is to find those new customers. So you've got to get yourself motivated by those phone calls that did work out and focus on those, not on that self-talk of doubt.
Yeah, there's a book written about that, what to say to yourself, or what to say when you talk to yourself, I think is the name of the book. And 85% of our self-talk is negative. It's just amazing. Yeah. I can't believe we made it this far sometimes. We worry about stuff that never ever becomes true. It never ever happens. We worry about it. And
well, you mentioned the Dale Carnegie books.
Yeah.
In his How to Stop Worrying and Start Living book, he says, if you've got something that's really worrying you, write it down on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, seal it, and put it in your desk.
Mm.
And then go read it 2 weeks later and see if it even came true.
Yeah. Yeah.
We worry about things that aren't even going to happen.
And it can really hold us back. I think it's, and along the same lines as attitude is also the belief that we have. What kind of belief do we have about what's going on in the marketplace? What's changed? What are we talking about that we need to do different? What are we thinking about that we need to do different? And what are we doing today that we need to do different? We're not going to be able to think our way out of this pandemic or out of this neutralization of our marketplace. We're not going to be able to think our way out of it, folks. We have to work our way out of it. We need to do and take action and get out of it. That's the only way that we're going to get a different outcome. But if we have a belief that somebody else is going to change the world and somebody else is going to change the marketplace, we're waiting for somebody else to do something. Who's in charge? Mm-hmm. Who's in control of your life? Mm-hmm. When you think about the belief system and how it impacts our behavior, which then gives us the result, you can see how powerful beliefs are. I worked with one client, and I was working with the sales rep, and I was listening to him lay down a message, and no energy at all, had no energy at all. And I stop and I go, I really got to ask you, after listening to that message, would you call you back?
Do you believe?
Yeah.
If you don't believe, how are they going to believe?
Yeah. And so he goes, well, no. I go, well, why would you want to lay a message down like that if you wouldn't even call you back? And he looks at me and he says, well, I don't ever return a voicemail call. I don't listen to my voicemails.
No belief.
And I go, you got to be kidding me. There it is. Yeah. Bing. He doesn't listen to voicemails. He doesn't believe voicemails work. Therefore, he doesn't leave an effective voicemail. Yeah. You ever?
Well, not only that, so interesting that we project our own limitations and beliefs on our customers. If I wouldn't do that, obviously a customer would never do that.
Right.
If I wouldn't return a phone call, obviously a customer would never return. Well, that's not true. Everyone reacts in different ways. As a matter of fact, you've got to find out how that customer works or how that prospect works and get them at their way of working, not imagining what your way of working is. I want to talk about also on this positive self-talk or this great attitude. I think it enhances your self-image because it allows you to focus on what you do well and your capabilities and less on your faults. You said we're not going to wish our way out of the pandemic, and that's absolutely true. I always think about positive mental attitude and finding a parking spot, right? I don't really think that I find better parking spots, but I'm happier with the parking spots I find. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So when I find one, I'm like, hey, I always find a great parking spot.
Yeah.
And so then I have a great attitude about it instead of going, boy, I always park so far away from the door and I got to walk in. And then we just start talking negative to ourselves.
Yeah. I'm grateful that I have a car. That I could park in a parking spot and I'm not chaining my bike up to the bike rack.
Scott's got so much money. You should see the car. He's got like 8 cars. And
right.
He's just rolling.
I'm a serial car owner. One at a time. I'm not, not parallel by any means.
You're not challenging Jay Leno's garage.
Right. I'm very monogamous with my vehicles. Another thing, Bill, is I think people have to include optimism. And optimism has 2 definitions. One is being hopeful before a decision is made. And the second is dwelling on the most positive aspects after a decision is made. Mm-hmm. So when we look at some of the things that we can control and some of the things that we can't control, the decisions that are made that are outside our control, we need to be optimistic in looking at the benefit of that decision and what can we find after it's made into the future based on that decision.
So one of the ways that you control your attitude is by looking at the positive things that have happened after a decision was made.
Right. Yeah. And there are good things. There are very, very good things. Losing a sale, unfortunately, means that you've got more time to sell somebody else, or maybe even there's a bigger deal or a better deal or a more profitable deal or one that has a better fit to what you really do.
Or you can learn from that loss to say, what should I do better the next time?
Right. Yeah.
What did I do wrong? I was thinking about that this morning, that we don't spend enough time after a sale, win or loss, really analyzing what we did right or what we did wrong and learning to get better. We just plunge on ahead, do the next one, doing the same thing over and over again. Goes back to what you said earlier. We need to make changes to do something differently.
Right. That's really debriefing a sales call or debriefing an appointment and looking at what are some of the things that I had as a goal going into it. How many goals did I have going into it? If I have just one goal going into a sales call and I don't meet that goal, or I get kind of some obstruction to that goal, is it a successful call?
Right.
No, it's not, because we didn't achieve the goal. If we go into a call with three goals, here are the three things that I want to accomplish, and I want to attempt to reach each one of them, there's a great chance that I'm going to be able to achieve one of them. Then is it a successful call? Yeah, because I got a successful outcome based on one of the goals that I had. But then debrief. Now, debriefing is separate than regretting. Too often salespeople regret a sales call gone bad. And they go, oh, I really should have said that, or
Right.
really, God, I just beat myself up. No, going, well, here's the things that I did right. If I had a chance to do it over, what would I do different? That's where we grow and we learn.
Yeah. So some of my ways to control my attitude, one is we talked about, and that's the positive self-talk. Control what you say. There are about 5 or 6 books that I know of on the power of the tongue and how we kill ourselves with our negative talk. So even Dale Carnegie's in his How to Win Friends book, his point number 1 is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Don't dwell on the negative. So that's one of the ways I control that. But I think right now, to tell you the truth, if you're watching a lot of the news and you've got the coronavirus map up on your computer and you're looking at it every 20 minutes and watching the numbers go up, and you're watching, and I don't care what news media you like, conservative or liberal or middle of the road, they're all negative. And their job right now is to get you fired up in the wrong area. So stay away from the news, man. It is not. This goal is no longer to tell you the truth. It's to get you excited and get you clicking on their Twitter or making a phone call or whatever.
One of the things that we have as a resource is Bill wrote a great article on stay mentally strong when sales are weak, and we'll make that available on the show notes, so you can have a link right to that article and you'll be able to download that and share it with your colleagues. If you're a sales leader, share it with your sales team. Make it a topic that you're going to talk about at the next sales meeting. Have everybody read it, go through and poll everybody. What did you take away from it? What are you going to do different based on it? I think that's really a good process when it comes to dealing with the beliefs, attitude, optimism, resilience, is to ask yourself, what's changed that's causing this marketplace not to work like it used to work? What's needed in order for us to get the outcome that we want, in order to meet the goals that we want? And then lastly, what's holding us back from delivering on what is needed? And what we're really going to find is that there's 2 things. It's either a mindset, a belief and attitude, or it's the techniques, it's the strategies, it's the technical aspects of the sales job, which is getting into a script, a word, a process, getting a system in place that you can follow and duplicate and improve. And when you get a process in place, you're able to measure it. And you can't manage what you don't measure. And once you're able to measure it, you're able to improve it. And that's where the growth and change happens.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. We can't control how many people answer the phone, but we can control how many calls we make. And so we put our value or our achievement on how many calls we make, not how many people pick up the phone. Measure those things that you can measure and continue to build on those. Maybe through making good notes, as Scott mentioned, you'll find out there's better times to call and worse times to call. So
that's one of the future episodes I'd like to do, Bill, is on the myth of making your number, and really break it down as to how do salespeople make their number. And there's too often sales managers are saying, well, did you make your number this week? How you doing this month? You're making your number. Just make your number.
Right.
Well, it's just not quite that simple and not that easy. And in some cases, salespeople that are led under that direction end up creating more work for themselves. The companies end up creating greater expense for themselves, and in turn generate less revenue and profitability because of that.
Right.
So there's some real myths as to making your number. I'd like to be able to do that in the future episode.
Yeah, excellent. That would be great. Now, I know you see belief as being, what you believe in your core is more crucial to your attitude than just trying to control your attitude. Tell me what you mean by that.
I think our beliefs are our truths. The truth is what you believe. And so often I hear salespeople say, I'm in the pursuit of truth. I'm searching for truth. And in reality, if we identify our beliefs, we identify some of our bias and our judgments that come along with our beliefs, and we drop them, we suspend them, truth arrives. Truth is there. We've just covered it up with our own bias, our own judgment, our own past experiences that define our belief system, that have an impact on our behavior, on what we do and don't do, that gives us the income and the results. I'll share a story with you. When I was really young, I signed up, or my parents signed me up for after-school activities. And there was one time I missed the activity bus to take me home. And I had to call my mom in the middle of winter and say, Mom, I missed the bus. And ooh, did I get a flamethrower back from my mother on missing the bus? Because, there's a few kids in my family. So she had to bundle up all the kids, and she had to drive into town, and she had to pick me up. And she's kind of giving me, round two on the way home. And from that point forward, I didn't do anything that rocked the boat. That experience created a belief in me not to take risks, which really held me back from a lot of opportunities. And it was that one experience, and my mother regrets it. I tell you, I have to bring it up occasionally sometimes. She just regrets it terribly, but it's the impact of an experience. And there's so many of them from our youth. There's so many of them. I mean, you think about our relationship with money. Money doesn't grow on trees, or there's more where that came from, or there's a belief it's not polite to talk about money. I hear this from salespeople. It's not polite to talk about money. I go, can I guess what your number one objection is? Money. You don't talk about money before you put a proposal together. And then the objection is, well, it costs too much. Well, what did you? Well, okay,
you had no idea what the cost was going to be.
Well, and it's different than price. So it's like, well, how do we frame it all? So the beliefs have a direct impact on. If we're unconscious about our beliefs, we're going to act unconsciously. And when we do that, is it intentional to a goal and an outcome? No, it's not. It's all subconscious.
And one of the ways to control those beliefs or change those beliefs that you talked about is through good record keeping, so that you can quit lying to yourself, right? A friend of mine tells me that all the time. Quit lying to yourself. Look at your numbers. What are you really doing? What does he say to me? Don't be upset over results you don't get from work you don't do.
Oh, wow. Profound. Well, just punch me in the nose.
So if you're not doing the work and you're not getting the results, quit being upset at the process. Your process is wrong. So change your beliefs and then change your attitude. Scott, you had a golden nugget that you wanted to bring up.
One thing that I think we should all be aware of is there's a difference between training and trying. And I think a lot of times when we get in a situation like this where things are a little rough in the marketplace, we just have to keep trying. Well, let's really work on training our team to be able to approach it differently. I had a client prospect conversation about 3 weeks ago, and I put together a proposal. It was a pretty sizable proposal. And of course, the nation shuts down. And I got this proposal on my desk, and I said to myself, I'm just going to wait here. And I'll know when the timing is right to send it. Well, yesterday I sent it off to him, and I was a bit assumptive in my opening cover letter in the email. I said, with everything going on, I wanted to wait for 3 weeks. I had this prepared 3 weeks ago, but I wanted to wait until the market changed before the timing was right. And I may be assumptive. I could be mistaken, but I thought maybe your attention might be on some other areas.
Right.
So, but here it is. And I got the nicest note back from him, and he said, you're absolutely right. I'm really glad that you sent it at this time. We're really starting to get our feet underneath it, and we're starting to adapt to the marketplace, and your timing is really good. I'll share it with some other people, and we'll get back to you.
Right.
And
because your proposal can be different now.
But training people on how to deal with this, it's almost like what happened is the tide went out and the rocks were exposed. Yep. And now sales teams are kind of sitting there, and they're the rocks, and management is going, well, we've got some things that we need to work on here. Let's get the program together, and let's work on developing our sales team to be able to make sure that we can adapt to this and not let this affect the reputation that we have in the marketplace. Whew.
I think a lot of salespeople are finding out the phone's not ringing anymore. Yeah. So they're going to have to be doing the phone ringing. People are just a little bit paralyzed and they don't know what to do. So you better go out and make something happen. Whenever I hear the word try, I think of the great master Yoda.
Oh yeah,
who said,
exactly.
"Do or do not. There
Yeah,
is no try."
yeah, yeah.
So,
Very good, very
so
good
quit
advice.
trying and start doing. And maybe much of that doing is getting some training, because it's a different way of doing things now.
Well, this is our second podcast together, Bill and I. You can find past episodes at getinthedoorpodcast.com. And you'll be able to see the show notes for this show and some of the resources that we've mentioned. I'll include a link to the book where it'll go to Amazon. Of course, you can get other places as
Right,
well.
right. Choose your place.
Yeah, we're going to have a link to Bill's article that he writes about when it comes to maintaining your attitude.
And I have another short 2-minute. I do a lot of 2-minute selling tips. So we'll put a link into my first one I did was on attitude. That's how important
Fabulous.
I think it is. So
We'll
my
include that.
website is reachdev.com. Scott's going to have a phone number that will be on the podcast, so you can get hold of either of us at those. We certainly welcome LinkedIn requests, LinkedIn invites. Send us a note, though. Don't just send us an invite. Send us a note, say, I heard your podcast, and let's connect on LinkedIn.
Great episode. Thanks for spending this time together.
Now, next week, we have our book study process. Did you want to talk a little bit about what that process is going to be?
Well, I'd like to be able to start covering a chapter an episode like Bill and I did. And we're going to kind of go through the highlights. And hopefully, as you listen to the podcast and you're learning about each chapter, you'll be encouraged to get the book. You'll be encouraged to be a chapter ahead or 2 chapters ahead and make your own notes. Be grateful if you send us some feedback. We've got a form on the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. You can fill that out. Send us an email if you'd like. That's okay too. Really want to make the show relevant. I think Bill and I have stressed that numerous times. We want to make the show relevant for today's marketplace. The best way to do that is to find out what challenges you, the listener, are experiencing, and what can we do to provide a solution to that. That's what's going to make this podcast successful, and that's our goal, and that's what's going to keep you coming back and listening to it, and that's our goal. Absolutely. So we hope you continue to tune in and subscribe, share it with others, tell others about it, and we want to make this the fastest growing podcast in the world.
All right. Next week, our topic is going to be defining value. And based on what we talked about today, go out and change your attitude. Look for those things you can control and start to do more of those. Been great with you this week. We'll talk to you next week.